Snow crunched beneath 7-year-old Lila Brown's torn shoes as she froze in the yard. Her breath came out in white puffs that vanished into the gray sky, her little arms wrapped tight around her chest. The icy wind cut through her threadbare sweater like knives. She had no gloves, no scarf, just the same faded clothes she had worn since the autumn. Across the yard, her cousin twirled proudly in a brand new pink coat, the fabric shimmering like cotton candy against the stark winter landscape. The coat looked warm, soft, and perfect, and stitched inside the collar, in careful black letters, was a name: Lila Brown. But that new coat was for me, Lila cried, her voice cracking. Her big brown eyes filled with tears that stung against the cold as they slid down her cheeks. Her lips trembled, and she pointed with shaking fingers. It came in the box with my name on it. Her cousin laughed, spinning faster, showing off the shiny buttons. Look at me. Isn't it beautiful? She shouted, oblivious to Lila's sobs. On the porch, Aunt Marjorie leaned against the doorframe with her arms crossed, lips twisted into a thin smile. Stop whining, girl. Clothes don't have names. If it fits your cousin, it's hers. But you took everything from the box, Lila stammered, clutching her thin sweater tighter. The boots, the sweater, even the toy. Her voice trailed off into a sob. Enough, Marjorie snapped, her eyes narrowing. Be grateful you even have a roof over your head. Don't make me regret keeping you here. Inside, Uncle George slouched in his chair, eyes glued to the glowing television. The sound of the football game roared through the living room. He didn't look at Lila. He never did. His only reaction to her cries was to raise the volume so he wouldn't have to hear them. Lila's knees buckled, and she sank into the snow. Her tiny hands dug into the icy ground as she sobbed, shoulders shaking, breath puffing in shallow bursts. The sight of her cousin parading around in the gift meant for her tore at her heart like shards of glass. And then, another sound broke through the scene. The deep hum of an engine. The crunch of tires on frozen gravel. At the end of the street, a polished black car slowed to a stop. The driver's door opened, and out stepped an elderly man in a heavy wool coat, his silver hair catching the dim winter light. His cane tapped against the ground as he walked, but his stride was firm, purposeful. He had come quietly, without notice, without cameras. He had come to see with his own eyes whether the gifts his foundation sent to the children of the town were reaching the right hands. And what he saw stopped him cold. A small black girl kneeling in the snow, shivering in rags, tears freezing on her cheeks. A cousin laughing in a brand new coat that still bore the stitched name Lila Brown. And on the porch, a woman watching with arms crossed, satisfied. The old man's chest tightened, his jaw clenched, his cane pressed harder into the frozen earth. This was not charity fulfilled. This was theft, betrayal, cruelty. And as his eyes locked on the trembling child in the snow, he knew, today, someone's life was about to change forever. The polished black car idled at the curb, steam rising from its exhaust like breath in the cold air. Lila lifted her head at the sound of crunching footsteps on gravel. Her wide eyes blinked away frozen tears, struggling to focus through the blur. The elderly man came closer, each step steady despite the cane tapping against the icy ground. His wool coat swept against his legs, and the wind tugged at the brim of his hat. He looked like a figure out of a storybook. Stern, dignified, but with a kind of weight in his gaze that could make liars crumble. Lila's cousin noticed him first. She stopped twirling and clutched the pink coat tighter around her shoulders, her smile faltering. "Mama," she whispered, uncertainty creeping into her voice. On the porch, Aunt Marjorie's painted lips spread into a brittle smile. Her eyes darted to the car, to the man, to the child sobbing in the snow. She straightened her blouse, brushed invisible dust from her skirt, and hurried down the steps. "Oh, what a surprise," she exclaimed, her voice sugary sweet. "Mr. Whitmore, isn't it? What an honor to see you here in person." The man's name was Henry Whitmore, one of the country's most respected philanthropists. His foundation had spent decades sending winter aid to orphanages and foster homes, ensuring no child would freeze when the snow fell. He did not smile back. His gray eyes swept over the scene, the trembling girl in rags, the laughing cousin, the stitched name inside the coat. He stopped at the edge of the yard, resting both hands on his cane. His voice, when it came, was calm but sharp enough to cut glass. "Who is the child crying in the snow?" Marjorie's smile quivered. "Oh, her? That's just Lila, my late brother's girl. We've taken her in, of course, out of kindness. But you know how children can be. So dramatic." She laughed lightly, glancing nervously at the guests in her mind that were not there. "The coat was a little big for her. So naturally, I gave it to my own daughter. It would have gone to waste otherwise." Lila's sobs broke the silence. She pushed herself shakily to her feet, her thin legs trembling. "No," she cried, her voice hoarse. "It had my name. It was mine. They took it. They took everything from me." She lifted her hands, red and raw from the cold, and pointed at her cousin. "Even the boots, even the toy." Henry's gaze darkened. He crouched slightly, leaning on his cane, and extended a hand toward her. "Come here, child." For a moment, Lila hesitated, glancing at her aunt's sharp eyes. But then her bare feet stumbled through the snow and she reached his side. He touched her shoulder gently, his hand warm and steady. "Show me," he said softly. She pointed again, her small finger trembling. "The coat. My name's inside. Look, they didn't even take it out." Henry's cane tapped once on the ground. "Open it," he commanded. The cousin's lip trembled. She looked to her mother for guidance, but Marjorie's face had gone pale. "Now, Mr. Whitmore," she stammered. "Surely this isn't necessary. Children mix things up and—" "Open it." His voice rang like a gavel in a courtroom. Slowly, the cousin unbuttoned the coat and pulled back the collar. There, stitched in neat black thread, were the unmistakable letters, Lila Brown. The silence that followed was heavier than the snow-laden sky above them. Henry straightened, his eyes blazing. "This gift was meant for her. My foundation sent it in good faith, and you dared to strip it from a child in your care." His voice rose, carrying down the street like a storm wind. "This is not charity misplaced. This is theft, cruelty, and I will not allow it." Marjorie's mask cracked. "Please, Mr. Whitmore, you don't understand." But he did. He understood perfectly, and his judgment had only begun. Henry Whitmore's cane struck the frozen ground once, sharp and decisive. "Inside," he said, his voice low but unyielding. He wasn't asking. He was commanding. Marjorie's painted smile crumbled. She glanced at the open collar of her daughter's coat, Lila's name still gleaming like evidence carved in stone, and knew there was no denying it now. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore," she stammered, gesturing toward the house. "Please, come in. It's bitterly cold. Let's talk like civilized people." Henry's gray eyes didn't leave her face. "Civilized people do not strip children of what belongs to them," he murmured. Then, turning to Lila, he offered his hand. "Stay by me, child." Together they walked across the snow-dusted path, the millionaire's stride steady, the little girl's steps hesitant but clinging to his coat as though it were a lifeline. The cousin lingered behind, shoulders hunched, clutching the coat like it had turned to lead. Inside, the warmth of the house struck them at once. The smell of roasted meat, the faint crackle of the fire, the glow of a television. And there, slouched deep in an armchair, sat George, the uncle. His belly strained against his shirt buttons, and his eyes remained glued to the flickering game on the screen. He barely turned his head when Henry entered. "Marjorie, who's this old man?" he grunted, reaching for his drink. Marjorie's voice was tight. "George, this is Mr. Whitmore, the benefactor. He came to check on the gifts." George chuckled dryly, never tearing his gaze from the television. "Figures. You send a bunch of boxes every winter. Kids outgrow stuff anyway. Doesn't matter who wears it." Henry's cane struck the floorboards with a crack that echoed through the room. George finally looked up, startled. The old man's eyes bore into him with a fury that made the football game seem like static noise. "Doesn't matter," Henry's voice thundered. "A child kneels outside in the snow, freezing, while you sit here fat and idle, saying it doesn't matter. That coat was stitched with her name. It was meant to shield her from this very winter, and you—" He swung his gaze to Marjorie, who flinched. "You stole it and dressed your own child in her place." Lila clung tighter to Henry's coat. Her lips trembled, but for the first time she felt someone's anger burn on her behalf, not against her. George rolled his eyes and leaned back in the chair. "You're overreacting. The girl's alive, ain't she? She's got a roof, food. That's more than most." Henry's jaw clenched so tight the muscles twitched. He turned to Lila, lowering his voice so only she heard. "Tell me, child, how long have they treated you this way?" Her big eyes lifted, hesitant, but she found courage in his steady gaze. "Always," she whispered. "They never give me what's mine. They say I should be grateful, but they take everything, even the toy in the box. They said I didn't deserve it." The silence that followed her words was deafening. The crackle of the fire, the roar of the game, even Marjorie's shallow breaths, all of it faded beneath the weight of truth spoken aloud. Henry straightened, his voice cutting like a blade. "George, Marjorie, you have not only failed this child, you have mocked the very purpose of charity. You have spat on generosity, and you have tried to bury her dignity under your greed." Marjorie's hands twisted in her apron. "Please, Mr. Whitmore, it was just a mistake. She's exaggerating. She—" "Enough." The old man's cane slammed once more against the floor. "I have seen enough with my own eyes, and I will not let this continue." George's jaw tightened. "And what are you gonna do, old man? Take her with you?" His tone dripped with mockery, but behind it was the first flicker of unease. Henry leaned forward, his eyes like steel. "If that is what it takes to keep her safe, then yes." Lila's breath caught. Hope, a fragile, trembling thing, flickered in her chest. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond this house. And in that moment, Marjorie and George both realized the balance of power had shifted. The millionaire wasn't just a visitor. He was judgment itself, standing in their living room. Henry Whitmore didn't waste a second. His voice cut through the warm living room like an icy wind. "Bring me the box." Marjorie blinked. "What? What box?" Henry's cane tapped once, steady and deliberate. "The parcel delivered with her name on it. Where is it?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. I don't know. It's just packaging. We threw it away." "Liar." His tone was so sharp that Lila flinched, though it wasn't directed at her. "Nothing is ever thrown away so quickly. Show me, or I will find it myself." George shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Marjorie, it's in the pantry, ain't it?" Her cheeks drained of color. Muttering curses under her breath, she disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later, she returned, a flattened cardboard box trembling in her hands. Across its side, in bold black ink, was the truth she had hoped to bury. For Lila Jameson. Henry took the box from her and turned it for all to see. The cousin's eyes darted to the floor, shame flooding her face. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. Marjorie froze. George frowned. Henry's eyes narrowed. Marjorie forced a shaky smile. "Excuse me, No," Henry said, his cane blocking her path. "I'll answer." He strode to the door, Lila shadowing him like a small bird hiding behind a tree. When he opened it, 3 neighbors stood outside, women from the street who had heard the earlier shouting. One clutched her shawl tightly, another glanced at Lila with worried eyes. We heard crying in the yard," one said softly. "It sounded like a child." Henry's voice was calm, but edged with steel. "You heard correctly. This child, whose coat was stolen, whose gifts were stripped, whose cries went unanswered." He held up the box with Lila's name like it was a banner. "And you will bear witness." The neighbors exchanged glances. One whispered, "I saw Marjorie earlier, parading her girl in a brand new coat. Thought it strange, since we knew the relief parcels had just come." Marjorie's composure cracked. "You busybodies don't understand. It was just one coat. She has others." "She has rags," Henry's voice thundered, "while your daughter flaunts what was hers. Look at her shoes, worn thin, soles nearly split. Look at her hands, red and raw from the cold. And you call yourself a caregiver?" The neighbors stepped fully into the house now, no longer tentative. They looked at George, who shrank into his chair, muttering about minding one's own business. They looked at Marjorie, whose painted lips quivered as the mask of superiority melted away. Lila, pressed close to Henry's side, felt her heart pound. For once, she wasn't invisible. For once, adults weren't pretending not to hear. Henry turned, lowering himself to the child's height. His voice softened. "Do you want to show them, Lila? Do you want them to see what was taken from you?" Her small hands shook, but she nodded. Slowly, she pointed at the cousin, who still wore the bright pink coat. "That's mine," she whispered, her voice cracking but steady. "It came with my name. She took it." The room went silent. Every adult present felt the weight of the child's words. No argument, no excuse, no performance could erase the truth in her trembling voice. The cousin began to cry, tugging at the zipper as if to shed the coat that had suddenly become unbearably heavy. Marjorie rushed forward. "Don't cry, darling. It's not your fault." But Henry's cane blocked her again. "No. Let her face what you forced her into. This shame is yours, not hers." The neighbors, emboldened now, murmured in agreement. One said, "We'll testify if needed, Mr. Whitmore. We've seen enough over the years." George muttered, "Testify? For what? You can't take her word over ours." Henry's eyes blazed. "Oh, but I can, and I will. I have influence with the courts, with the council, with every board your names might one day cross. This child will not be silenced again." Marjorie's hands flew to her face. "Please don't ruin us. It was just a coat." But Henry only turned to Lila, his expression softening once more. "It was never just a coat. It was dignity, and she deserves it back." The neighbors nodded, some whispering prayers under their breath, and in that crowded living room, with the fire crackling and the evidence plain for all to see, Marjorie realized she had lost control. Her power, built on lies, vanity, and silence, had finally collapsed under the weight of truth. Word spread quickly down the narrow lane. By the time Henry Whitmore stepped back onto the porch with Lila's tiny hand curled into his, more neighbors had gathered, drawn by the raised voices and the sharp clap of the cane against hardwood floors. The pink coat glowed under the weak winter sun, a blazing symbol of theft. Marjorie tried to salvage her mask. She painted a brittle smile across her face and raised her chin. "Everyone is misunderstanding. We were just sharing. Families share. My niece is always so dramatic." But the murmurs in the crowd told another story. People remembered whispers from the past, times they had heard Lila crying at night, times they had noticed her shoes too thin for the frost, while Marjorie's daughter pranced in something new. Henry lifted the box again, its ink scrawled with undeniable clarity. "For Lila Jamieson." His voice carried across the yard. "Do not let her twist words. This was not sharing. This was theft. This was cruelty hidden beneath false refinement. And today, it ends." George shuffled behind his wife, his hand twitching toward the door as though he might flee. But Henry's glare pinned him in place. "You will not slink away. Not this time." From the crowd, a neighbor named Mrs. Caldwell stepped forward. Her voice was steady. "I saw it myself. The postman brought that package 3 days ago, asked if the Jamieson child lived here. Marjorie signed for it. I saw her name on the slip." Gasps fluttered through the gathering. Marjorie's face drained of its last color. "And today," another neighbor added, "we saw your girl strutting up and down in that coat like it was hers. You laughed about it, Marjorie, said it was a gift from a distant admirer." The lies collapsed in real time. With every witness, with every remembered detail, Marjorie's polished mask cracked further until nothing remained but the sneer of someone cornered. Henry did not shout. His voice dropped low, but it carried a force more terrifying than thunder. "This child was left in your care. Instead of shelter, you gave her scraps. Instead of love, you gave her cruelty. And when kindness came from outside these walls, you stole it from her hands. Do you know what that makes you? Not just negligent, not just unkind. It makes you a parasite on mercy itself." Lila clung to his sleeve, her tears streaking her cheeks. She whispered so only he could hear. "Will they make me give the coat back again? Henry bent down, his voice a steady promise. Never again, my dear. What is yours will remain yours, and you will never be voiceless while I stand. Then, rising to his full height, he addressed the neighbors. Bear witness. I will not simply leave with her. I will pursue this to the full extent of the law. Fraud, neglect, emotional cruelty. I will see papers filed. And when they stand before the court, no glamour or social ties will shield them. George barked out a bitter laugh. You can't ruin us over some trinkets. Who do you think you are? Henry's eyes narrowed. I am the man who sent this gift. I am the one who trusted your household to treat a child with basic decency. And I am the one who will make certain you answer for failing in that duty. The crowd erupted, murmurs turning into firm words, agreement, outrage, promises of testimony. We'll speak up. She deserves better. It's gone on too long. Marjorie grabbed her daughter's hand and tried to pull her inside, but the girl tugged free. Mama, I don't want it anymore. It's not mine. The coat slipped from her shoulders, landing in the dirt. All eyes turned back to Lila, still trembling but holding herself upright beside Henry. The image was seared into everyone's mind. A child wronged, her stolen dignity lying in the mud, and the benefactor who refused to let her fade into silence. And as Henry placed his heavy coat across Lila's shoulders, shielding her from the biting wind, he looked back at Marjorie one final time. Your mask is gone. Your neighbors see you. And soon, so will the law. The next morning, the Jameson house was eerily quiet. For once, no shouting, no scolding, no bitter mutterings carried through the thin walls. Lila sat curled on the edge of Henry's leather seat, the enormous car humming steadily as it carried her into town. Her small fingers brushed the pink coat on her lap, hers, finally hers, and yet fear still trembled inside her. Henry glanced down. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Lila, he said, voice steady as steel. But we'll make sure this never happens again. That means laws, not just words. At the county office, papers rustled, pens scratched, and witnesses arrived one by one. Mrs. Caldwell carried the memory of the postman's slip. Another neighbor described the laughter at Marjorie's party when the coat had been paraded about. The clerk listened, brow furrowed deeper with each testimony. Henry's reputation carried weight, but today he leaned on evidence, not wealth. He laid out the package itself, the torn address label still bearing Lila's name. By noon, protective custody papers were filed. For now, Lila would stay under Henry's guardianship until the hearing. A social worker arrived to check her condition. When she lifted Lila's shoes and saw the holes, she shook her head. This child was neglected, severely. News spread quickly, faster than rumors of a party dress. By evening, headlines bloomed online. Philanthropist's gift stolen from orphan niece, investigation underway. At home, Marjorie's face was twisted in fury. She paced the living room, clutching her phone. He's destroying us. Years of reputation, gone overnight. George sank into his armchair, muttering, It's just a coat. Why is he making such a fuss? Marjorie whirled on him, eyes flashing. Because it's him. He wants to look like a hero. We can't let him win. She tapped furiously at her phone, calling an old friend at a magazine, spinning a tale of misunderstanding and malicious exaggeration. But the story wouldn't bend. Witnesses contradicted her every claim. Even her own daughter refused to lie, saying plainly to the investigator, the coat was meant for Lila. Mama made me wear it. Desperation sharpened into venom. Late that night, Marjorie marched up the driveway of Henry's estate, George trailing behind like a reluctant shadow. She hammered the brass knocker with both fists until the butler answered. I demand to see him, she screeched. He's kidnapped my niece. But when Henry appeared at the top of the stairs, calm in his robe, his answer was unwavering. She is safe, and you will speak to the court before you ever speak to her again. Marjorie's mask slipped entirely, fury spilling out unchecked. You think money gives you the right to tear apart families? She's ours to raise as we see fit. Henry descended slowly, each step a sentence. Family is not a license for cruelty. It is a responsibility, and you failed. He stopped at the last stair, towering above them. Do not return here. Next time, it won't be a butler turning you away. It will be the law. The door shut with finality. Outside, winter wind howled around the disgraced couple. For the first time, George muttered something Marjorie didn't want to hear. Maybe he's right. Maybe we went too far. But she silenced him with a glare. No, we fight. Inside, Lila peeked from the hallway, her stuffed bear clutched tight. Will they come back? She whispered. Henry knelt so their eyes met. They might try, he admitted. But the difference now, Lila, is that you won't be alone. Not ever again. And with that promise, she exhaled a little more of the fear she had carried for years. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and polished oak. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting sharp lines across the benches where neighbors, reporters, and curious townsfolk sat shoulder to shoulder. Every whisper stilled when the bailiff called the session to order. At the plaintiff's table, Henry sat tall in his dark suit, his hand resting lightly on Lila's shoulder. The girl, dressed in a soft blue dress chosen for her comfort, clutched her stuffed bear tightly against her chest. She was nervous, but she was not alone. Every time her eyes flicked upward, Henry was there, steady as a mountain. Across the aisle, Marjorie Jameson adjusted her fur collar and lifted her chin high. George slouched beside her, avoiding everyone's gaze. Her lawyer leaned close, whispering furious instructions, but her painted smile did not falter. For years she had controlled the narrative. Today she hoped her poise might bend the truth again. The judge entered, robes sweeping the floor, and the proceedings began. Henry's attorney rose first, voice clear. Your Honor, today we will prove that the defendants deprived a minor of rightful aid, subjected her to neglect, and willfully stole resources meant for her welfare. Gasps rippled when the evidence was placed on the table. The torn cardboard box, the shipping slip bearing Lila's name, and photographs of the pink coat lying discarded in the dirt. The courtroom leaned forward. Witnesses followed, each more damning than the last. Mrs. Caldwell took the stand, her voice firm despite Marjorie's glare. I saw her sign for it. The postman asked if Lila lived there. She said yes, then took the package inside. Another neighbor testified about hearing Lila's cries and seeing Marjorie's daughter boast about the mystery admirer's gift. A staff member from Henry's foundation confirmed the box's intended recipient. Piece by piece, the image became undeniable. Finally, the judge allowed Lila herself to speak. Her small frame seemed to vanish behind the wooden witness chair, but when she opened her mouth, silence fell. It had my name on it, she whispered. I saw the letters. It said it was mine. But Auntie gave it to Clara. When I cried, she told me to hush. Her fingers twisted the bear's ear. I just wanted to be warm. Henry's chest tightened as he watched her bravery unfold. He did not prompt her, did not interrupt. This was her voice, finally heard by all. Marjorie's lawyer rose in a hasty defense. Your Honor, children often confuse things. The gift was for the family. My client only... But before he could finish, the judge raised a hand. The shipping label leaves no room for confusion, nor do the consistent witness statements. Attempting to discredit a 7-year-old child under these circumstances borders on cruelty. The mask cracked. For the first time, Marjorie's composure slipped, her voice rising shrill. So what if it said her name? She doesn't need fine coats. She should be grateful she has a roof at all. My daughter deserved it more. The room erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously, neighbors shook their heads, and the judge's gavel pounded for order. The damage was done. Marjorie had unmasked herself before everyone. Lila flinched at the sound, but held steady, clutching her bear tighter. Henry bent close and whispered so only she could hear. You've done enough, sweetheart. Justice will finish the rest. The judge leaned forward, voice heavy with authority. This court will reconvene tomorrow to deliver its ruling. But let it be clear, what I've heard today is gravely troubling. As the gavel struck once more, Marjorie's eyes darted wildly, searching for some last shred of control. But it was gone. The neighbors, the press, the law, they had all seen through her. And though the official sentence was yet to come, everyone in that room knew the balance of power had shifted forever. Henry rose, taking Lila's hand once more. As they stepped into the sunlight outside, cameras flashed, but Henry shielded her with his coat. "Almost over," he murmured. "Tomorrow, you'll be free." And for the first time in years, Lila let herself believe it might be true. The courtroom was packed the next morning. A hush spread as the judge entered, carrying a stack of notes thicker than anyone expected. Sunlight poured through the high windows, catching motes of dust that floated like suspended time. Everyone leaned forward, waiting. Having reviewed the evidence, the judge began, and having heard from witnesses both inside and outside the family, this court finds that the defendants, Marjorie and George Jamison, acted with deliberate neglect and misappropriation of aid intended for a minor. The words hung heavy in the air. Lila clutched Henry's hand so tightly her knuckles whitened. Across the aisle, Marjorie stiffened, her painted mask of dignity now just a smear of fear. The judge's voice sharpened. "Marjorie Jamison, your testimony revealed not remorse, but contempt. You not only deprived this child of what was rightfully hers, you mocked the very principle of mercy. This court issues a restraining order effective immediately. You are barred from all contact with Lila Jamison. In addition, charges of fraud and neglect will be filed and pursued by the state." Gasps broke out. Reporters scribbled furiously. George raised his head for the first time, face pale. The judge turned next to Henry. "Mr. Whitmore, your guardianship petition is hereby granted. Effective immediately, Lila Jamison will be placed under your care until a permanent adoption proceeding may be finalized." Lila's eyes widened. She turned to Henry, tears shimmering. "Does that mean I can live with you?" Henry bent down, his voice breaking just slightly. "Yes, sweetheart. From now on, you have a home. My home." The gallery erupted into applause before the gavel restored order. But the air had shifted. Justice had been spoken, and everyone felt it. Outside, the press surged forward, cameras flashing. Marjorie pushed past, face twisted in fury as microphones captured her denials. But her words no longer mattered. The world had seen her cruelty. No headline could rewrite what had unfolded in court. Henry shielded Lila as they reached his car. "Come on," he said softly. "There's something we need to do." Instead of driving to the estate, he took a winding road to the very street where Lila had once shivered in the cold, staring at a stolen coat. Neighbors gathered as the black sedan stopped. From its trunk, Henry's staff carried tools and saplings. At the edge of the Jamison property, where the ground was barren, Henry knelt beside Lila. "This place saw your pain," he said, "but it doesn't have to stay that way. We'll plant something here. A promise that what was taken will be restored." Together, with small hands and steady ones, they pressed the young cherry tree into the soil. Neighbors joined, tamping earth, patting roots into place. When it stood upright, fragile but alive, Lila stepped back. Her stuffed bear dangled at her side, her pink coat snug against the breeze. For the first time, her chest rose and fell without fear tightening every breath. She looked up at Henry. "Will it grow tall?" Henry smiled. "Taller than this house, and every spring it will bloom." A reminder that dignity, once restored, only grows stronger. The crowd cheered softly, not the roar of spectacle, but the warm murmur of community choosing truth over silence. As dusk fell, Lila leaned against Henry's side, eyelids drooping. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was the cherry sapling swaying gently, its roots already beginning to claim the earth. And with that, her story turned from survival to belonging, from stolen gifts to a future no one could take away.